In 1875, a girl was born in the small town of Alès, France. Her name was Jean Louise Calment. This was a time when the world was vastly different from what it is today. Cars and airplanes had not yet been invented, and people still traveled by horse-drawn carriages. Homes were lit by candles, and electricity was a luxury unknown to most. In this period of history, no one could have ever imagined that the girl born in Alès would go on to live for more than a century, outliving everyone around her and setting a record that has yet to be broken. Jean Louise Calment would live an extraordinary life, one that stretched over 122 years. When Jean was just 14 years old in 1889, one of the most iconic structures in the world was being built, the Eiffel Tower in Paris. She grew up during the construction of this symbol of modern engineering. A few years later, in 1896, when Jean was 21 years old, she married, just as the world was on the cusp of monumental change. Around the same time, Mahatma Gandhi had just moved to South Africa to begin his journey of social reform. Interestingly, Gandhi was only 6 years older than Jean, yet their paths were so different. By 1914, Jean was 39 years old, living a peaceful life with her husband and daughter. Europe, however, was about to face the greatest challenge it had ever known. World War I erupted, and the continent was plunged into chaos. It was a time of massive political and social upheaval, and millions of lives were lost in the conflict. But Jean's personal life remained stable. She was a witness to history, but the tragedies of war did not touch her home directly, at least not yet. 2 decades later, in 1934, as Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany, tragedy struck Jean's family. Her daughter passed away due to a lung infection. Jean was 59 years old at the time, an age when most women are enjoying the company of grandchildren. But Jean still had more than half of her life ahead of her, though she couldn't have known it then. She experienced the heartbreak of losing her child, an unimaginable pain for any parent, but life continued for her. In 1942, as World War II raged across Europe, Jean lost her husband. By then, she was 64 years old and had already lived through some of the most significant events of the 20th century. But the world was still changing around her. When India gained independence from British rule in 1947, Jean was 72 years old. She had lived through the age of empires, world wars, and revolutions, witnessing how the world was transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable when she was a child. In the 1960s, humanity took a giant leap forward. In 1969, when astronauts landed on the moon for the first time, Jean was celebrating her 94th birthday. The world had gone from horse-drawn carriages to rocket ships in her lifetime. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, was the phrase that echoed across the globe, and Jean was there to hear it. As the decades passed, Jean's fame grew. By 1985, she was 110 years old and still living independently in her home. However, in 1988, Jean moved into a nursing home. It was around this time that the world began to take notice of her remarkable age. Jean became a media sensation as the oldest living person on Earth. When Jean passed away in 1997 at the incredible age of 122, she had witnessed the invention of airplanes, cars, telephones, and the internet. From the late 19th century to the dawn of the 21st, Jean Louise Calment crossed the limits of human imagination, living a life longer than anyone had ever recorded. But what was the secret behind her extraordinary longevity? Of course, luck plays a role in living to 122 years. But how much of it was due to luck, and how much was the result of her lifestyle choices? That's the question researchers have been trying to answer for decades. One of the most significant studies on longevity was the famous Danish twin study, conducted between 1870 and 1900. The study analyzed over 2,800 twins to determine how much of longevity is influenced by genetics and how much by lifestyle. The findings were groundbreaking. Only about 20% of an individual's lifespan is determined by their genes. The remaining 80% is influenced by lifestyle and environmental factors. This study tells us that the choices we make in life, such as what we eat, how much we exercise, and how we manage stress, have a far greater impact on our lifespan than our genetic makeup. But what are the specific lifestyle choices that can help us live longer? To answer this question, Dan Buettner, an explorer, author, and researcher for National Geographic, set out on a journey in the early 2000s to discover the secrets of the world's longest living people. In 2003, Buettner and a team of experts, including anthropologists, dietitians, and historians, identified regions in the world where the highest concentrations of centenarians, people aged 100 or older, were found. These regions became known as the Blue Zones. The Blue Zones are Sardinia, Italy, known for its mountainous terrain. Sardinia is home to a large number of male centenarians. Okinawa, Japan. The people of Okinawa have the longest disability-free life expectancy in the world. Loma Linda, California, home to a community of Seventh-day Adventists who live longer than other Americans. Icaria, Greece, an island where people not only live longer, but also stay healthy well into old age. Nicoya Peninsula, Costa Rica. This region has one of the highest rates of centenarians in the world. The question is, what do these places have in common? What can we learn from the lifestyles of the people who live there? After years of research, Buettner and his team identified 9 lifestyle habits that were common across all 5 blue zones. They called these habits the Power 9, the keys to living a longer, healthier life. Let's explore them one by one. 1. Move naturally. The people in blue zones don't engage in intense physical exercise, but their daily routines involve a lot of natural movement. They walk to work, tend to their gardens, and carry out physical tasks as part of their everyday lives. Modern studies back this up. People who sit for more than 6 hours a day have a 19% higher chance of dying earlier. Even walking for just 11 minutes a day can reduce the risk of premature death by 25%.